have like 1 minute to challenge all of us to consider something during our time together today. An easy element of culture change is language. And when we change language, it really affects practice as well. And so bear with me here, but I'd love to challenge everyone listening and even speaking today to consider and think about the word facility. You know, if I asked you, what does facility really mean? If you looked it up in a dictionary, what would you find? To be honest, the word usually means a building, right? Like, have you thought of or seen the facilities management team of some big stadium or whatever, right? Or think of a school. A school is a facility. And then think about this. Why is it a facility? Actually, because nobody lives there. And so I would love to share with you all, as we look at changing culture, building resiliency, holding on to team members. An easy way to do it is to go to normal and go a little away from institutional. And one word we could all try to move away from is, instead of facility, try to use home, try to use community, they're softer, or just refer to the place, St. John's, you know? And one last thing, if it's in your personality, you could call the word facility an F word, and those are not allowed in this.
Next slide, please. All right, so this is the first session, obviously, and so we are going to do a QAPI section for each of the weeks. And this week we'll be focusing on leadership. And just as a refresher for those of you who may not know, QAPI stands for Quality Assurance, Performance Improvement. And QAPI really focuses on transforming the lives of nursing home residents through continuous attention to quality. QAPI is that foundation. It's really focused on improving quality of care, but also person-centered care. So it's important that as leadership that we take a look and we talk about those walkarounds, but that we get input also from residents and families. And it's not only on processes and measuring how we're doing processes, but how are those outcomes? And sometimes getting that input from residents and their families can help guide that. For defining quality, it's how work is done. So it has that broad scope. It can be the entire organization. It should include all staff and all departments. But when you're doing a QAPI project, it can be something as small as a specific floor or unit, or a specific activity related to infection control. And when we talk about systems thinking, we really want to switch from being reactive to being proactive. So instead of fixing something after a problem has already happened, as leadership, we want to be proactive. We want to use our tools like walkarounds to predict when problems may occur. We want to get staff input so that way we can understand better how things are functioning. And we use that by feedback from staff, our data and measurements that we have, and then we take our tools and we help fix whatever issues that may come up or that we're predicting may be a problem in future. Next slide, please. As we go through the 12 steps of QAPI, there are 5 elements of QAPI or QAPI. The first is design and scope when we're talking about our performance improvement projects. And then second is that governance and leadership, and that's what we'll cover today. But it also includes the performance improvement projects, feedback, data, systems, and monitoring, and then systematic analysis and action. Next slide, please. So when we take a look at governance and leadership, leadership really needs to be actively engaged. It's not just one person doing all the improvement work throughout the entire facility. Everyone really needs to play a role when it comes to QAPI or QAPI. Everybody provides essential input when it comes to improvement work, and so it's important that we gather that input from staff, from residents, from families, and other stakeholders. It's also important as leadership that we make sure that we have those adequate resources. So we not only talk about having time and actual supplies, but money to do that for other things. And then ongoing and consistent staff training. We need to make sure that staff understand what QAPI is, QAPI is, and how to perform a performance improvement project versus a small PDSA and what that looks like. And that's part of what these 12-step processes will be as you go through the ECHO sessions. And then as leadership, you hold that accountability to your staff members for processes and results. And it's really essential as we talk about culture that we have one that's non-punitive. So staff feel free and open to give you feedback and to talk about problems or things that may become a problem in the future. Next slide, please. So when we talk about leadership and responsibility, we really want to create that culture of support for staff. Support from the top is essential, and you must have an environment that promotes QAPI for all employees. And as leadership, we set the tone that provides the resources. Next slide. So for next steps, we will be talking about leadership walkarounds, and it's one of the ways that we can do that is by giving staff and patients and their family the opportunity to really see your face, and that's what walkarounds do, and we'll cover that briefly. Doing a walkaround led to a discovery of a safety issue if you have done them, and then if you've done walkarounds, have you complimented a staff? Have you taken that time to say, hey, I've noticed something really great as I'm doing, the walkarounds. Tool. So the walkarounds give you the opportunity to learn. It's kind of like doing a root cause analysis, a failure mode effect analysis with what you're doing all in one. It can be really great, and it shouldn't be looked at as an audit. You don't want to come across as that you're monitoring something, but that you're there as a face, as a person to listen and learn. Next slide, please. Alan Frankel at IHI established what walkarounds are in 2000. And if you go onto IHI.org, you can find a lot of wonderful resources regarding walkarounds and how to get started. So if you haven't done walkarounds before and you're looking for some great tools, resources, check out that website because it will be. So there are some ground rules for walkarounds. You need to decide how often. You can decide if they're daily, weekly. I know time is really difficult for a lot of leadership staff, so even if it's bi-weekly, but the whole point is it doesn't have to be a full hour. It doesn't need to take 2 hours. You don't need to do the whole facility. It's just decide on a consistent time that you do it. Let staff know that you're doing it so they know where to find you, they know where to look, and that it's confidential. If they share things with you, that they see you as another person and not as someone coming in and monitoring them. And you want to establish leaders who doesn't have to be the same person. So to help reduce that burden, please go ahead and rotate between those. Next slide, please. So again, it can happen in anywhere. The location should change, and it should change because if you go to the same place every single time, you're going to get the same information. You're not going to get anything new. And so make sure that you rotate around, but that you become that familiar face, that familiar family that we were talking about when it comes to some opening statements or some 3 steps that you can consider when doing your walkarounds. There's some opening statements that you can consider. So talking about why you're doing the walkarounds, you can have an icebreaker. You can ask questions regarding a certain specific topic, or you can just talk with the staff and just say, how's your day going? And just start there. But it's always important that you do something that I like to call close the loop, and you tell them if a barrier comes up, what your next steps are, what your action plan is going to be based on what they told you. You may not always have an answer, but you know that you're going to be taking steps to figure out what the answer should be. And so it's always important that you communicate that you heard them and that you're going to be taking action after the communication with the staff member. Next slide, please. We do have these scripts, so I think these slides will be available so you can use some of these scripts to help guide you. Next slide, please. Again, these are just additional questions that you can ask residents, or not residents, just saying don't watch people, don't be the one auditing, be there as a person, as a family to learn from your staff members and patients and families. Next slide, please. Make sure that if you're doing walkarounds that you display those results and again, close that loop of what you've learned.